We'll be looking at, as we said, the story of David and Goliath out of 1 Samuel chapter 17. And thus far, we've been walking through the book of 1 Samuel, seeing God literally moving through the life of Israel, the nation of Israel, his people, through this period of time in the Old Testament. We've seen him do some crazy things, the way he interacts with his people, getting their attention, leading them and guiding them, them begging for things that he says they don't want, yet giving it to them anyways, him speaking it to them through the actions of things going on in and around their nation, and we'll see that again here tonight. So thus far, we've talked about coming into the book, there was no king in Israel, and they had a spiritual leader, the prophet, the high priest, Samuel, who it's named after, leading them, and eventually the people asked for a king. They crowned Saul the king, and Josh talked about him last week, and it was okay for a while, and then his heart turned, and no longer it was in submission to God, and that affected some stuff. And so as we pick up here today, the new king is on the rise, and we'll mention his Samuel, the spiritual leader, going out and finding the new king, King David. And this is just before he becomes king, before he's officially made king over the nation, but he's been anointed, is being said that he will be the king. And we pick up the story in chapter 17. I want to read it to you. I'm going to read not the whole story because it's a whole chapter long, 50-something verses. I want to read a section of it, the good part. And if you will follow along, I encourage you to pull out your Bible to look there. We'll put it up here on the screen, but there may be things you want to underline. You may want to familiarize yourself where it is because you may want to go back and read it again and be like, man, this is such a great story. So we'll read this together. I want you to just listen to the details, listen to the emotion, listen to the characters that are presented, and we'll dig in. So 1 Samuel chapter 17, I'm going to start in verse 32. Let's read together. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." And Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hands of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Which I'm still not sure how he was managed to say that. I mean, he's still talking to this kid. I don't know if he was just had it at that point. It's like, somebody's got to do something. Let's send the kids out. I don't know. 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic and put on a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I can't go out in these," he said to Saul, "because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. And then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with the sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. 43, he said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David and his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and to the wild animals." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And this very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Man, that's a good story, right? How many of you guys had heard the story of David and Goliath before? Yeah, a lot of you? If you haven't ever heard the story, even read it yourself, surely you've heard the analogy. This is a real David and Goliath situation we have here. You've heard sports commentators say it, or people in, you read news releases about it. This, comparison of David and Goliath, the underdog versus the overdog, the guy who doesn't stand a chance, the team that could never make it, and I think they have a chance. The Cinderella story is another analogy sometimes is used. Sometimes we have these illustrations that show this. I think we have some of these. There's the typical one that we have. Maybe you saw in Sunday school class. There's little David not wearing a shirt. I'm not sure why. And then there's Goliath. He's mocking him and doesn't even see the stone coming for his forehead. So that's what we tend to think of it. And then we see this in other places. These other analogies of we have something big versus something little. I have no idea what's going on here, but that idea of big versus little, underdog, the guy doesn't stand a chance against someone else. And then in modern days, maybe a recent one I saw, an article last week, modern day David and Goliath, LeBron versus Curry. Yeah, that one's going in David's favor right now. This story is epic. The setting that has already happened here before, verse 32 we read, Israel, their biggest foe at this time were the Philistines. And it's this group of people that moved into the area that was called the Promised Land. It was given to the Israelites that they were promised that they could move in and take it. But this other army came in and began to take these different cities. They controlled 5 different cities and continued to move inward, closer and closer to Israel's homeland, towards Jerusalem, towards their main cities. And so at this point in the story, it says they were in Judah, which means they had taken almost half of the Promised Land away from the Israelites under the leadership of Saul. Things were not going well. And here they are, camped out in this one area where it seemed to be this valley. Both of the camps of the 2 armies are on both sides. And down in the valley, they could see everything that was happening in it. And every day, for 40 days, it said, twice a day for 40 days, so 80 times, this guy named Goliath would come out and taunt the Israelites. And what he was asking for, what he was saying is, hey, instead of all of us fighting, let's do this. I'll come out and fight one of your guys. Just 2 of us fight. 1 person dies. And then whoever loses will just become, the slaves of, or will be the captors or the prisoners of the conquering army. And so this was not uncommon in ancient warfare. It was efficient and, a whole lot less loss of life. And so when you have some guy like Goliath, you're like, let's try that. That sounds like a great idea. It describes Goliath here as being roughly 9 feet tall, which the tallest guy ever recorded in human history was 8'11". And so this is even taller than him, potentially. So potentially the tallest man ever to walk the face of the earth, if you will, was standing there before the Israelites saying, hey, come and fight me. Send out one of yours and come and fight me. He would come out and mock them every day and curse them every day and tease them every day. And no one would fight. No one would do anything. Well, David had been back home. He was the youngest of several sons, and all of his older brothers had gone off to war. And David, his dad said, hey, why don't you send some supplies to your brothers? Send them some wheat and some bread and take some cheese to their commander, which is kind of nice of him. I don't know why that detail's in there, but it's there. And he says, go and take some food to them. So David's like, all right, sweet. I'll go up to the front lines, take some food to my bros, and check on things, see what's going on. So while he's there and handing out bread and talking to his brothers, this Goliath guy comes out morning or evening at some point and makes his daily taunt and says, hey, bring it on. And David's like, what's going on, guys? What's happening? Why are you allowing this to happen? And he begins to converse with the different soldiers and ask them, why is this happening? What's going on? How can you guys allow him to talk about us or talk about our God in that way and defy us, defy our God? And so he, as we picked up in verse 32, says, I've got to do something about this. I can't allow this to happen. When we read this story, it is, I don't know if you feel it, but this overwhelming desire for this story to be about us. And oftentimes when it's preached, when it's talked about, when it's taught, the idea is that, well, we can be like David. That we can look in this story and say, oh, here's the underdog. I want to be that guy. And I love the underdog story. When there's a sports team, if it's not a team that I'm always like immediately associated with, then I'll, just a team that I'm neutral or a game that I'm neutral about, I'll always root for the underdog. Who's not supposed to win? I want them to win. I don't know if you're like that. Or when you think about things in your own life and you say, man, I would really like to, tell that guy off. I would really like to come from behind and win the game. I'd really love to be the hero. And so we look at this story, and it is overwhelmingly tempting to look at it and say, where am I in this story? I think I'm David. I want to be David. And, man, I would love to preach you a sermon about that. But I can't. Because the more I've studied this and looked at this and read other commentators on this, that's not what this story is about. It'd be a great story about how we build up our courage and how we build up our confidence and we go tackle the giants in our life. But that's not what this story is about. So in the midst of reading about this and this desire and thinking about, well, where's this desire for confidence and courage come from? And I found some articles about how to get courage or how to get confidence in your life. In fact, I found one in Time magazine titled, 4 Extremely Easy Ways to Fake Confidence. So I was like, I'm intrigued. So if you're not a confident person, it says, well, you can fake it until you make it. Number 1, step 1, it says, be shameless. Just go for it. So it says, just act confident and people will think that you're competent. And it referred to this study that someone had done that said that most people who act confident are not competent, and most people who are competent don't act confident. So if you are competent, if you can do some stuff, if you can do what's needed, but you're not very confident about it, just fake it and act like you're confident, and then you'll get to do what you need to do and you'll be a great leader. That's essentially what it says. So just be shameless and act confident and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Just act like it. So, walk tall, carry a big stick, and everybody will just follow you. Sociology. People just follow people that are confident, so just act like it. So number 2, it says this, study what leaders do. If you know enough, maybe you can be confident too. So if you just read lots of books and go to seminars on the weekends and spend your extra time studying what confident people do, then maybe you can work up some confidence yourself. And then you can overcome your fears, you can overcome your challenges. You can be the underdog and you can save the day. Just study what leaders do. Number 3, do stuff you enjoy. This is taking a different approach. If you're terrible at being confident, well, go do something that's totally unrelated. Find a good hobby and that you enjoy doing, that you're confident in how you do it. And then when you spend the weekend or the night or whatever doing this thing you like doing, then when you show up into this situation at work or at school or in this relationship where you need some confidence, you need to build up some confidence from deep within, you just pull from that reservoir of confidence you have in this other activity and bring it into this current activity. And then you can make it. Then you can overcome. Then you can save the day. Do what you need to do. Just do some other stuff and pull from that reservoir. Or number 4, focus your efforts. And this was specifically directed to introverts. So it said that just plan your schedule better so that you're having to do less social things at a time. So you go have your good alone time by yourself right before you got to go be social and be confident in this social setting. And you get lots of alone me time. And then when you walk into that social setting, you're all charged up and you're ready to go. But if you have too much, if you do bad planning, if you have too many social activities and too much time with other people, you're just going to get worn down and you'll never be able to be confident in that situation. And so just plan better. That's all you got to do. There you go. There's your 4 easy ways of finding confidence and courage and faking it. So, and oftentimes I think we operate, and you can tell I'm mocking those ideas, we operate like that. We think, I need to be confident, I need to find some courage from somewhere, and so I'll just stir it up from within, I'll read a good story from the Bible, I'll say, let me just think about it really hard. Let me put myself in some kind of mental state that I can fake myself or make myself believe I have something to be confident in. And so we read this story about David and Goliath and we think, oh, there's the key. I just need to be a good Christian. I just need to be a good follower of God, and then everything will work out. The trouble is, that's not what this passage is saying, and it's not always true. It's this twisted version of that same secular idea of, well, if I just do good stuff, then God will say, oh, you're blessed now, and everything will work out. Everything will be fine. Don't you worry about a thing. And it's not true. God doesn't promise that in Scriptures. In fact, he promised the opposite. He says, even if you follow me no matter what, how many good things you do, the goodness you do isn't good enough to get the life that I desire for you. And so many times we're searching for this self-assurance and this confidence, and we are at a loss. So as we look in the story, we look at the opponent, we look at Goliath. We say probably he had some of this self-assurance. He had built some stuff up. It helped that he was the tallest guy, no doubt. But if you also read the story, again, some of those scriptures, those verses we didn't read, it goes into detailed description of his armor. This scale mail armor that he had, how he had armor over his legs. He had a shield bearer. He carried this giant shield. He had a javelin. The point was like 15 pounds on it. He had a sword that was huge. His armor itself weighed 125 pounds. Huge. And so he had confidence in the things that men of his day put confidence in. He had confidence in things of this earth. He had built for him, if you will, his 4 steps to faking confidence was, let me put on a lot of armor, carry a big sword, and have a guy with a shield in front of me, and be the tallest person. Those are all helpful. And so he had confidence. And based on those things, he said, I can do what I need to do. I can fight for my army. I can mock these people, and I'm confident in that. And indeed, as we read the story, David was encouraged to share this confidence, to have a similar confidence to what David had, to what Goliath had. When he says, hey, I'll go fight him, Saul says, all right, let me give you some confidence. Let me give you my armor. Let me give you my helmet. Let me give you my sword. Put these on. And he puts them on, and it's like that image of a little kid putting on his dad's jacket, or a little girl wearing her mom's high heel shoes or something. It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. He can't maneuver. He can't do what he needs to do. He's in danger if he would wear those things. He says, no, forget this. I don't need that. I don't need that confidence. What's interesting is this is something that was, there was a confidence that David was drawing from, unlike what Saul or what Goliath was drawing from. Saul was the king who had now at this point been rejected. If we remember, the nation of Israel had asked for a king. They said, we want a king like all the other nations have. And they got Saul. So the king that they asked for had got them to this place where they were daily losing territory, where they were cowering in the face of this giant, where he was not leading, where he was not helping his people. And instead, he was cowering in his tents with them. And he said, let me help you depend upon this armor. And he said, no thanks. David was depending on something else. And it's alluded to a chapter before in chapter 16, where we read about when he is anointed to be the future king of Israel. It's in chapter 16, verses 6 and 7. Samuel had gone out. God had sent Samuel out to go anoint the new king. And he says, go to the house of Jesse. Lives in Bethlehem. He's got a bunch of sons. Go see him. So Samuel shows up. Tells Jesse what's up. Jesse brings on all his boys and parades them before him, if you will. Samuel looks at him and sees the oldest Eliab. He's big and tall, and he looks good. And he's like, oh, surely this is him. I can tell this is going to be him. And he looks at him, and God says to Samuel, he says, no, that's not him. And he says this. I'm going to read it to you. Verse 6 and 7 says, when they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The Lord looks at the heart. And so he parades all of his sons before him, and he says, none of these will do. Samuel says, do you have any other sons? Is there somebody that's not here? And Jesse, his dad, says, there's the youngest son, but he's out tending sheep. Oh, you really want to see him? He's like, yes, I want to see him. So he calls for him, brings him in. He says, this is the one, the youngest kid, the smallest one. And his brothers probably like, what? In fact, when David shows up there at the battlefield, Eliab, the oldest one, is like, what are you doing here? He says, God says, I look at the heart. I don't look at the outward appearance. I look at the heart. the author of the book of 1 Samuel has something against tall people, quite honestly. I'm not sure. When we saw Saul, he was ahead over everyone else in his description. Goliath, the tallest man anyone had ever seen before. The song that Hannah sings, if you remember this in the chapter 2 of 1 Samuel, she sings this song that essentially alludes to everything that happens in the book of 1 Samuel. It says, the Lord will bring low, the mighty will bring low the high, it says, and raise up the humble. And so, here David is, the anointed future king, walking in. No one knows this about him except his own family. And he shows up, and he says, I don't need this stuff. And he takes up what he's comfortable with, what he knows, what's been a part of his life, his sling and his staff, and he walks out. And he says, I'm trusting in the Lord my God. And he conquers the Philistine. And so as we think through this, as we read through this, again, I said that we're not David. And so the question is, well, who are we? Who are we in this story? Here's your answer. We're Israel. We're the people of Israel who are cowering before their enemy. We cower before our enemy. We lay paralyzed by our fears and have feelings of powerless to do anything about them. When we look at this story, we say it's a great story, but who am I? The answer is we are Israel, because we, like them, are not capable of fighting the fight that needs to be fought for us. There's some needs that we see of Israel within this story. So we ask, well, what does Israel need? In the same way we ask for ourselves, what do we need? Well, frankly, what they needed at that moment was a champion. Israel needed a champion. The Hebrew here, when it describes Goliath as the champion, it says that the champion came down, Goliath the champion comes down into the valley and calls out his call for someone to come and fight. The Hebrew word for champion here means a man in between. The man in between. So he goes out in between the armies, between his own army and their enemy's army. And what Israel needed more than anything in this moment was a champion to go and face Goliath, a man in between them. As we think about this in our own life, we are in need of the exact same thing. What we want to see in this story is an example. We want to say, David is our example of what we need to be. We want to be able to say, we need an example to help us out to see how to react or what to do in a given situation. We want something to help us deal with our issues. So we look at our biggest fears in our life. You and I, we look at the biggest fears in our life, and they tend to be centered around what we want. What do I want? What do I want in my life? And when I can't get what I want, that brings this fear, that brings this stress, this brings this worry, this anxiety into my life. In the same way, just like the Israelites, they want to win the victory, but they need a champion on their behalf. We look at this and we just say, we want an example to teach us how to do that so I can do it on my own. And so what we want comfort. We want the worries of life, the challenges of life to go away and just be, when we boil it down, we just want to be comfortable. Or sorry, my phone went off. Somebody texted me. Forgot to silence it. My bad, guys. Don't text me right now, right? So we want comfort. We want success. We want to be the winner. We want people to look at us and say, like, man, he's a hero. She's the best. She's at the top. Her name is great. His name is the best. All glory and honor be to him. That's somewhere in us is swimming around that desire to be successful. That's what we want. Or we want approval. We want others to say, hey, you're all right. You're okay. You can be a part. You're accepted. You can be in. No matter what's going on in your life, no matter where you are, no matter what's happened, you're okay. We just want someone to say, we're okay. Or sometimes we just want everybody to get along, which probably has something to do with comfort. And so we go through life and we organize our life looking to be the hero, we look at David's life, we look at this story and we say, I want to be like that. I need some courage like David to be able to overcome my challenges so that I can be comfortable. I need to help to overcome my challenges so I can be successful. I need to overcome my challenge so we can just be at peace, so I can be accepted, so you will like me, so you'll be okay with me. And so we go through life swimming in these issues, thinking that is our deepest need. But this story isn't a story of inspiration to help us out with those things. This isn't a story of an example, just get it together, and even though the odds are against you, just go get them, tiger. That's not what God's saying. Here's what we really need. For you and I, as we sit here today, what we need beyond all of that other stuff, comfort, success, acceptance, peace, we need a relationship with our God. As I read through this story and thought about the implications, what we deeply need is a relationship with God. We need to have a God that we can rest in and trust in, to know him, to rest in him, to trust him, to be in relationship with him. And unfortunately, we, all of us, all humankind, have an issue that separates us from God. It's been happening since the very beginning. We've been in rebellion against him where we say, no, I want what I want. I want what I've got it figured out. I want what I want. Not what you want, not what you want for me. I want what I want. I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on something, and I've got to go after it myself. I want what I want. And in doing so, we rebel against him. He says, this is how life is meant to be done, and we say, I want to do it this way. And in our rebellion, it affects our relationship with him. It brings us to a place where we are no longer in a relationship with him, and he has to do something about it. He's not okay with it. And so while we run from him, he says, I've got to go after them. I've got to rescue them, because where they're headed is terrible. Where they are headed is doom. Where they're headed is death. And the scriptures talk about a death that are beyond our heart stopping beating and breath ceasing to be in our lungs, but a death that is eternal. And it also speaks of a life that we are intended to experience in Christ with God, in relationship with him. And so our deepest issue beyond our everyday fears and concerns and worries and anxieties is our deepest issue of our sin. And the picture the scriptures paint for us is that we can't deal with it on our own. We can't do this on our own. We need a champion. We are in deep need of a champion, someone to go between. God has to do something about our rebellion, has to do something about our sin. He is just, and he must punish our rebellion, must punish our sin, but also he is loving and wants to rescue us from that doom, rescue us from that death. And so he sends someone in between for us. As we read this story of David and Goliath, written all over it as allusion toward the great champion, the champion to come, Jesus. And so, as we look through this and we recognize we deeply need a champion, the message of the story isn't that we need to be like David and boldly take on our personal Goliaths, but instead that we have a David who takes on our biggest issue for us. Our man in between is Jesus. Israel had a Goliath issue and they needed David. We have a sin issue and we need Jesus. As we think about David and what he did, to quote himself, he went through the valley of the shadow of death, and Jesus himself went all the way into death. And we think about this picture of what David did, putting his own life on the line for his people. He walked down into that valley as the champion on behalf of his people, representing them. If David lost, his whole people lost. He wasn't just fighting for them, he was fighting as them. And in the same way, Christ, seated on his throne, recognizing something had to be done to rescue us from our deepest issue, our greatest nightmare, death and separation from God. He said, I've got to do something about it. And he came down to earth, became human, put on the human body, put on human life, and represented us. He didn't just fight for us, he fought as us, representing, doing life better than it had ever been done before, without sin, without separation from the Father. And then he died for us, taking the punishment, receiving the justice that was deserved for our sin. The book of Hebrews talks about, in chapter 11, talks about all of the heroes of old, all the heroes of the Old Testament. You read through chapter 11, it's just like this hall of fame of people in the Old Testament. David's mentioned there. And he says, look at all these great people. Look what they did. In faith, they trusted God. In faith, they followed God. And then in chapter 12, verse 1, right after that hall of fame, it says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. There's a lot of great stories in the Old Testament. There's a lot of great people who operate out of great faith. And the scriptures say here in chapter 12 of Hebrews, it says, those are great stories. Because of their faith, we get to operate in faith. And surrounded by their faith, we get to do the exact same thing that they did, and that's look to God the Father and his provision. And his provision, in our instance, as Hebrews communicates, is Jesus. So we look, as we continue on in this race of faith towards God and following God, we look to Christ and what he has done. We look to Christ, who is the perfecter and pioneer, finisher, completer. The Greek word means different things there. The completer, the perfecter of our faith, the pioneer, the finisher of our faith. When I was in college, Keith and I were on a flag football team together. And we were a couple Christian guys, and we're like, hey, let's get a flag football team, and we'll take on all these other teams on our campus, all the Greek fraternities on our campus, all the teams that have better athletes, and we will be like David against these Goliaths. And we named our team Finisher, after Jesus, out of Hebrews chapter 12. Man, it was great. Great T-shirt. We lost a lot of games, but we had a lot of fun. But I love this passage of Scripture because it's saying, hey, don't fix your eyes on David. Don't fix your eyes on all these heroes of our faith. It says, fix your eyes on Jesus, the author, the pioneer, the completer, the finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame. This idea of, man, if we just do like David, if we're just faithful and we just take risks for God and do crazy things for God, then everything's going to work out. You know how I know that that's not necessarily true? It worked out for David in that instance, but it's not always true. Because there's stories like John the Baptist in the Bible. Jesus said, there's no one like John the Baptist. He's the best. You know what happened to John the Baptist? He got his head cut off. Spent time in jail. Everything didn't work out for him, at least not on this earth. Jesus, nobody did it better than Jesus. Without sin. No rebellion in him against the Father. What happened to him? He died an excruciating death. His friends abandoned him. Seemingly it didn't work out for him. At least not by the world standards. But we fix our eyes on Jesus, who, with the joy set before him, he endured that cross. The joy set before him, how did he have joy in that moment? It's been said that Jesus was the man who had everything. When he came down to earth, out of heaven, he had everything at that moment. He created the earth. Everything listened to his voice. And he came and lived among us where no one listened to his voice. What was the joy set before him? He had everything except us. We were the thing he didn't have, and he came to rescue us as our champion on our behalf, to rescue us, to go between us and our greatest issue, our sin, our death that we deserved, and rescued us out of that. And so as we think about David and Goliath, as we think about ourselves and the Goliath that we face, not the Goliath that we think we are facing of I need to be more comfortable, I need to be accepted, I want people to like me, those pale in comparison to the deepest need that you have. You need relationship with your God, with your Creator. And there will be a joy with Christ wrapped up in that supersedes, that goes beyond, that is deeper than any trouble or trial or challenge that you and I face on this earth. For ages, for generations, there have been people who have placed faith in God and gone through tremendous circumstances. You can read about it in the scriptures. You read about how their hope is not in the things of this world, but their hope is in something deeper. Their hope is in something greater. Their hope is in something that they enter into when their heart stops beating and their lungs are no longer filled with air. And they enter into eternity, into eternal life. That is what we need. That is what we were created for, to be in relationship with our God eternally. And so as we look through this story, as we think about what does this mean for me today, I know that we have stress. I know that you have challenge. I think about the week ahead of me, and I've got issues. I've got stuff to figure out. I got questions that I have. But I know beyond all the anxiety that I have in the week to come, I know that I have a God who loves me and has pursued me, that has rescued me from my deepest challenge, my biggest giant. And it goes so far beyond the temporal things that I'm worried about this week. So regardless of what happens in the week to come, the months to come, the years to come, the challenges that I face, that you face, here on earth, we have a God who's willing to go in between, who's willing to put himself on the line, who's willing to be our champion, to be our Savior, and to save us. The band's going to come in just a moment. We have an opportunity to sing. This first song, I requested that Kyle would sing this song and lead us in this song. It's this idea of crying out to God that he would carry us through it all. Life is hard. Some days harder than others, some weeks harder than others. Some of your lives are harder than mine. In some ways, I've experienced things you haven't yet. And through it all, God carries us. And he will see us through the temporal challenges and struggles and Goliaths that we think are our biggest issue. And bring us into glory, bring us into a deeper joy that goes far beyond what we could ask or imagine. Tonight as we sing, tonight as we process, as you think about this week, I want you to reflect on the story and know that there is a God who loves you and has pursued you, has rescued you. And I want you to ask yourself, do you trust him? And do you trust him with the things that you're facing this week? That no matter how it works out, he is trustworthy and he is good and he is with you through it all.